Welcome you again to the Wednesday night Bible study of the STONECREST Church of Christ. We appreciate your devotion to our studies on Wednesday night. We are greatly encouraged by both your participation and your kind comments to our studies on Wednesday night. We began on last Wednesday with a thought that I call divine intersection. You will remember that I use as an example of that one of the Old Testament characters by the name of Moses. You'll also remember that we defined an intersection as a place where things converge, meet or come together. That's been your experience as it has been mine. When we are driving our vehicles on the roadways, the highways, the interstates here in Georgia or wherever you are viewing this program, you know that there are times in your travel and in your journey, you'll come to an intersection. And at that intersection, there may be a traffic signal with the red, green, and yellow. There may be a four-way stop sign, or there may be just a traffic circle like we have here adjacent to our building. At our location for the STONECREST Church of Christ, we're located at 750 Mount Carmel Road. But Mount Carmel Road intersects Mill Road, and at that intersection is now a traffic circle where, depending upon the speed of the traffic, you can either slow up, you can stop, you can get at the circle and do whatever you need to do. My whole point is this: at the intersection, traffic meets, traffic converges, traffic come together. Now come here. Whenever that happens, a decision has to be made. And I've taken that metaphor, I've taken that illustration to suggest to you that there are, in fact, times in life where God arranges a meeting together of his will and his purpose, and God allows that to come together at a certain point in time. It is strategic. It is what I call divine timing, where all of the elements, the situations, the circumstances converge. They meet, they come together at a strategically appointed time by God. Therefore, we have divine timing or divine intersections at earthly points or earthly intersection, where time and eternity comes together at the same point. I tried to illustrate this last week with Moses in Exodus chapter 3, where Moses is a fugitive from justice. He has killed the man, it was self-defense, but nevertheless, he had killed the man in Egypt. He was raised in the palace. He was raised to be a prince. He was raised as a prince. He was raised to be the next king in Egypt. But God had divine intention and purpose for Moses' life. Well, long story short, Moses now has been on the run. He's been away from Egypt now for 40 years. He's been tending the flock of his father-in-law by the name of Jethro. Jethro is a Midian priest, not necessarily a follower or a believer in God. And so Moses is married to one of Jethro's daughters by the name of Zipporah. On this day, and you can either go to Exodus 3 or go back and look at last week's presentation and see that on a particular day, Moses leads his Jethro's flock to the west side of the mountain. On that particular day, God sets on fire a bush. The bush burns, but the bush is not consumed. Well, that was God's way of getting Moses' attention when he brought his flock to the west side of the mountain. Now, from the west side of the mountain, he has a crystal clear view of the mountain of God. And when God sees him on the west side of the mountain, God sets the bush afire. Moses is curious as to why the bush is burning, but it's not consumed. It's not burning up. Well, it's timing. It's God arranging a circumstance in order to get Moses' attention, to call Moses up to the mountain, to recommission Moses back to Egypt for the purpose of delivering his people out of captivity. And all of this comes together strategically when Moses comes to the west side of the mountain. He looks up and sees Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. God sets a bush on fire out of curiosity. Moses climbs the mountain. God stops him at a certain point. Take off your shoes. The ground you're standing on is holy ground. Remember how we explained it last week, how that Moses sees the bush burning, but now the bush is talking. It is, in Bible theology, what we call a theophany, where God simply chooses to manifest and reveal himself in special kinds of ways in order to connect with mankind. Be mindful now, God's spirit. God is spirit. That means he's immaterial. He's not flesh where you can put his hands on him. And that's the genius of Jesus, because God now takes on human flesh rather than his essential nature as being spirit. And so God shows up in different ways on different occasions in the Old Testament in order to communicate to man. And we call those things situations and circumstances theophanies. Now, all I'm trying to get you to see is simply this. Certain time, specific time, God is going to bring and converge things together in order to commission, in order to recommission, in order for that person to understand God's will for his or her life. Now, tonight, I want us to look at another divine intersection, and that's from the life and the book of Nehemiah. Now, remember also that we said that this divine timing, when we have divine divinity and humanity coming together at a certain point in time, oftentimes this occurs in Scripture. Listen to this carefully. Oftentimes this occurs in Scripture, not in the solitude of one's prayer closet, not in the serenity of a cave somewhere. Oftentimes, this intersection of the divine and the earthly occur, listen to this, as one is simply going about his or her everyday, mundane activity. It is usually not out of the ordinary. God oftentimes reveals himself to people in specific ways as they are conducting, as they are going about conducting just normal, routine, mundane, everyday life situations. Remember with Moses, what is he doing? Well, he's sending Jethro's sheep. That's what he normally does. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary on the part of Moses. He's just doing routinely and mundanely what he does on a daily basis. And the message there for us is keep your eyes open. Keep your ears open. God may be trying to show you something, communicate something to you in just the ordinary, routine, and the mundane. You don't have to go off in a cave somewhere. I mean, you don't have to go off in a monastery somewhere. Just keep your eyes open. Keep your ears open. Seek God during, watch this, just the routine, just the mundane, just the ordinary days of affairs. Now, let's look at this now. Another example of this from the life of Nehemiah. Now, Nehemiah chapter 1 and verse number 11 will have these instructive words for us. It simply says at Nehemiah 1 and verse number 11 that Nehemiah was the king's cupbearer. Oh, that passage is so pregnant, is so full of information, not clear at this point. You have to know something about the background and the history, and the clarity of the statement will just ooze out. Well, first of all, let's see if we can perhaps understand some background here. It says that Nehemiah was the king's cupbearer. Well, first of all, who's the king? Secondly, what's a cupbearer? Oh, I love the questions you're asking tonight. You're asking some sure enough good questions. All right. First of all, let's look at the role of cupbearer. Now, watch this. It's his job. It's his daily routine. It's his occupation. It's what he normally does during the course of any day. Now, let me help you to understand, and you'll see a graphic on the screen that describes from ancient protocol who a cupbearer was and what a cupbearer does, and the qualifications of a cupbearer. According to ancient protocol in Persia, maybe I better stop right there and give you some historical background here, because Nehemiah works for the king of Persia. Now, you're sitting there saying, who's the king of Persia? Well, at this point in time, and you'll see this in a minute or so, his name is Artaxerxes. He is a Persian king. Well, I need to help you with that. Let me take you back in Israel's history following the death of David. David takes all of the tribes and unites them into one monarchy. He unites the 12 tribes of Israel. They form one nation. David now dies. The kingdom, the united kingdom, is passed on to his son by the name of Solomon. If you've ever read about Solomon, you know he has some problems. He ended up having 700 wives, 300 booths, 300 concubines. So there's 1,000 women right there. Well, part of the problem with those 700 wives was the fact that those women served other gods outside of Jehovah. I don't have time to, to give you all of that background. Most of this was what was called a political alliance, meaning Israel would go out and conquer another nation. The king, in order to protect himself, he'd already been conquered. And what kings would do is give the conquering king their daughters to form a political alliance. Well, that's where most of these 700 wives are going to come in. So Solomon now has 700 wives. He started to build places of worship for these wives and their gods, their deities, and their goddesses. In order to finance that, he had to tax the people. The people were supporting the immorality of his king. His problem. Solomon dies, and now the kingdom is passed on to Solomon's son by the name of Rehoboam. There is a renegade in the kingdom by the name of Jeroboam, who comes to Rehoboam, who is the son of Solomon, and says to him, Rebo, we all know your daddy was a dog. But problem with that is that he has levied all of this stress and struggle and heavy taxation upon the people. Jeroboam says to him, in essence, listen, if you would lighten the load, we will serve you devotedly. When you go back in 1 Kings and 2 Kings and read this account, what's going to happen is this. This is 1 Kings 12 now, the story I'm telling you now. Rehoboam consults with those old wise elders that advised Solomon. And they said to Rehoboam, son, listen to him. what he's saying makes some sense. You know, we all know, you know, Solomon had his problems and had his issues. As wise as he was still foolish in some of his behavior and decisions that he made. Listen to him. But then the text says that Rehoboam heard that news, but he went to his own uh, young counselors. You miss your shot right there. He dismissed the advice from the old elders. That's redundant. I know they're old, they're elders, but I'm trying to preach a point here. He dismissed the advice from those wise men who advised his dad, and he started listening to his contemporary. And his contemporary said, Rehoboam, we're enjoying the party, man. Come on. Don't come on. Don't listen to them. And he did not listen to them. He went back and he told Rehoboam, listen, if you think you've had it hard, you ain't seen nothing yet. That's just a loose translation of what he said. He said, my little finger will be thicker than my father's loins. In other words, your request ain't gonna happen. Well, long story short, of the 12 tribes, there is now a major division. 10 of those tribes go to the north. In biblical history, they're called the Kingdom of Israel, the northern kingdom. 2 of those 12 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, stay in the south. In biblical history, they are called the southern kingdom of the Kingdom of Judah. Over here in the north, they change everything. They change feast days, they change priesthood. They go off in total apostasy. Watch what happened. 722 BC, the Assyrians come and take the northern kingdom of Israel into captivity. 586 BC, Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar comes and takes Judah and Benjamin into captivity. Watch this. For 70 years, they're going to go into captivity. While in captivity of those 70 years, Persia now conquers Babylon. And when Persia conquers Babylon, the Persian king now allows people who were slaves out of Judah to go back to Jerusalem. And 3 migrations, they go back to Jerusalem. They go back under Zerubbabel. And you can read this now in the book of Ezra. Zerubbabel goes back and rebuilds the temple. Then Ezra leads a delegation of people back to Jerusalem. And Ezra restores the worship of God and the priesthood. And then the 3rd group to go back was under our character here by the name of Nehemiah. He's going to lead people back to Jerusalem and rebuild the broken down walls that have been broken down for more than 120 years. Now, watch this. With that background in mind, be mindful that when Cyrus allowed people to go back to Jerusalem, everybody did not go back. In point of fact, 2 major characters didn't go back. One is a woman by the name of Esther. One of the reasons Esther didn't go back to the homeland in Jerusalem is because she ended up marrying the king of Persia by the name of Ahasuerus. But watch this. Nehemiah had a good government job. Teach Dr. Barclay. Nehemiah was also one of those that when he was free to go back, he didn't go back. Listen, he was cupbearer for the king. He was a baller. He was a shot caller. He was a man in charge of stuff. He had a prominent job working for King Artaxerxes until one day he heard some news, and we'll get into that in just a second, in terms of divine timing. Now, watch this. Some of you will remember, at least historically, January 1st, 1863, when Lincoln gave an edict called the Emancipation Proclamation Act, where all African Americans are now free because of that act. Well, a lot of slaves who were free to go northward, go westward, chose to remain on southern plantations. Well, they were free. Why didn't they leave? Well, this is the only job they ever knew. Their family was here. Some of them didn't have family in the North. We don't have time to talk about the Underground Railroad, all of those courageous acts by Black men and Black women. Here's the point. They were free to go home. They were free to leave the plantation. Many simply chose to stay there. Same thing happened with Nehemiah and Esther. Nehemiah had arisen to a prominent position in the Persian government. And so the text tells us that he is a cupbearer. Now, I want you to watch this, because this is about to make some sense right through here. Now, according to ancient protocol, the cupbearer was an office and a position of trust. People were always trying to assassinate the king. In fact, previous Persian kings had already been assassinated. So they implemented an office called the office of the cupbearer. The responsibility of the cupbearer was first and foremost the official wine taster and food taster for the king. So you had to trust your cupbearer, because people were trying to assassinate, and one of the best ways to assassinate a king was via the food that he ate. So kings got smart. They decided, okay, I won't eat any food, I won't drink any wine, I won't have any beverage until somebody eats it and drinks it first. President of the United States, when he goes abroad, even when he eats in the White House, when he eats out, when he's on the campaign trail and he stops at a hamburger joint, somebody has eaten a hamburger first. Somebody from the Secret Service is going to taste the food that the president is going to eat. And if the king sees the cupbearer fall over dead, king knows, I ain't eating that burger tonight. I ain't eating that steak tonight. I got to pass on them pig feasts tonight. Do you now see that the role of cupbearer was such a significant role that it demanded trust and loyalty and dedication? Now, but more than that, the cupbearer, as you can see on the graphic, had to be cultured. He had to be knowledgeable in law. He had to be conversant in politics. He had to be a man of high integrity. He had to be confidential. And watch this characteristic. He had to be handsome. King didn't want ugly folk in his presence. And then watch this. He had to be a personable kind of a man. Why? because Persian kings did not allow sadness in their presence. You come into the presence of the king with a sad countenance on your face. First thing the king is going to think is, oh boy, you've eaten some food and now you want to serve it to me? Not up in here. And so they did not allow people with sad countenance in their presence, because that may be indicative of the fact that they drank the wine, they've eaten some food, and now it's showing up on their face without ultimately killing them. Well, Nehemiah had this responsibility. And as you can see the graphic on the screen, the best way to define a cupbearer's role is to associate with the position today in our government called the chief of staff. The president chief of staff to the president of the United States, to President Biden, is Ron Klain. He's an attorney. He's a man who has tremendous organizational skills since he is chief of staff. Nobody sees the president without permission from Ron Klain. He vets everybody that goes into the Oval Office. He sets the president's calendar and agenda. When he's meeting with foreign leaders and dictators, Ron Klain is always by his side. Well, Nehemiah had a role just like that. Now, I want you to watch this. At Nehemiah chapter 1 and verse number 1, we read these words. The words of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah. And then it says, now it happened in the month of Chislev, in the 20th year, as I was in Susa, the citadel, that Hanani, one of my brothers, came with certain men from Judah. And I asked them concerning the Jews who escaped, who had survived the exile, concerning Jerusalem. Oh my goodness. Let's unpack this now. Nehemiah says, now it happened in the month of Chislev. Now, when we look at the Hebrew calendar, Chislev is similar to our November, December. I'm just teasing you, setting you up for something. I'm not going to have all the time I need to explain all of this. But he said, now it happened. What happened? He tells what year it is. It's in the 20th year. It's in November, December, that he hears some news from his physical brother Hanani. While Nehemiah stays, Hanani makes the 800-mile trip from the Persian capital of Susa to Jerusalem. And Hanani brings Nehemiah news back that things are not going well with those who escaped the exile, those who went back to Jerusalem. He said, things are not going well. The walls are broken down. The people are suffering. The economy is bad. There is no protection. There is no security. Our people are in a bad situation. The next verse talks about Nehemiah's response to this news. He says at verse 4, as soon as I heard these words, I sat down, I wept, and I mourned for days. And then he says, I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. That news broke his heart. What's interesting is this. Hanani, Nehemiah's brother, had gone to Jerusalem. Nehemiah had never made that trip. But news broke his heart. Nehemiah was born as slave. He was free to go back. He chose not to go back. He'd never been to Jerusalem. And I'm going to show you in next week's message that he's going to lead a delegation back to Jerusalem, rebuild, restore a place that he had never, ever seen before. But in order for him to do that, God has and God will arrange a divine intersection. Remember, the news breaks his heart. Kings did not allow sad countenance in their presence. And I'm going to show you next week when Nehemiah shows up for work one day with a sad countenance. He should have been killed that day. But God arranged, God navigated the situations and the circumstances with divine timing. And I'm going to show you where God created a perfect scenario for Nehemiah, like Moses, to go on a mission to the glory of Almighty God. You don't want to miss this next week. And until then, may the Lord of the harvest bless you. And may he bless you real good.